Playoff changes are coming. Hugh Freeze is advocating for more SEC teams to get locked in automatically. But are these good changes? Welcome on into the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. I'm your host, Mike D, and thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. Joining me as he does every single week, co-host at Sports Visions Radio and owner and show host at Georgia Alabama Sports Live, my good friend Thrift Barringer, here to talk a little college football with your boy, a little Auburn football, but we're going to talk playoffs here today. Every year, I sit down with Commissioner Greg Sankey at SEC Media Days, and we have a talk about kind of the state of the conference. This year, it seems we're going to have a more interesting conversation about expansion and his advocacy for the teams in his league. Look, Thrift, I saw Commissioner Sankey a bunch of times throughout the NCAA tournament following Auburn basketball, and he actually called every team that made it through to the Sweet 16. And then when I saw him again, he said, I told you. This guy was standing next to the Big Ten commissioner at the Final Four, I believe it was, at one of the NCAA sites. And Thrift, these guys are supremely confident in the plan that they've collectively come up with for their conferences to keep their conferences on top. Part of that plan is getting as many teams as possible into the big dance to make sure that SEC and Big Ten supremacy remains in college football. Let's start the show talking about these changes. I felt like the playoff system worked extremely well last year. I'm not a big advocate for change to the system so quickly. I think they're looking at 2026 possibly for some of these changes. And quite honestly, I thought 8 would be enough. I'm good with 12. What are your feelings about the playoff system, where we're at, and whether change is good or not?
I'm with you on 8. I was an advocate of the playoff system and having more than two teams. I like the thought of using the BCS rankings and transforming that into the playoff, but that's a whole different conversation. But I had no problem with it. I wasn't one of those who were saying that it was going to devalue the regular season with adding 4 teams. But knowing how business works, and I emphasize business, I didn't say football, I said business. This was going to expand. This was going to add more. They were going to add more teams eventually because of the cash cow that the playoffs represent and adding more games that have more meaning at the end of the season. If you look at last year, of the 12 teams that made the playoffs, Mike, I'm telling you, there's several teams like Boise State. I mean, Arizona State wasn't, half bad. I know they had a game that was competitive against Texas. I would have been okay with them not making it. Indiana not making it. I would have been okay with 8 last year. And now you're telling me you want to expand that to 16. I don't know if I'm ready to go down that road because I'm with you. It really does devalue games in the regular season because it's kind of like baseball. It doesn't matter what you do early on. If you get hot, you can win a national championship. You see that in college basketball. You see that in college baseball. And now that was the one difference with football. And now you're telling me, nope, this is how it can happen there as well. So I know we can go in many directions, but I'm with you. I don't know if I'm feeling the expansion to 16.
Yeah, part of the expansion talk is automatic qualifiers. Right now, if you are the conference champion of a Power 4 conference, you get an automatic qualifier. Beyond that, it's kind of a foregone conclusion, Thrift, that the runner-up of the SEC is in. It may not be an automatic qualifying bid, but we know whoever loses that SEC championship game is in, especially with the elimination of divisions. So you no longer have the opportunity to kind of get like a weak SEC East opponent that went 8-4 in conference and just landed in a championship game. So you eliminate the possibility of there being just kind of an off year in one side of the conference. It's just straight best record. You cannot convince me that this conference is not going to have multiple 10-win teams every single year. They could have had 5 of them if they just blew it last year. Alabama blew it, Ole Miss blew it, Missouri blew it. Those guys, they had a chance to get in if they won 10. And if the SEC pushes for more automatic qualifiers, the Big Ten certainly will push for more. And it seems like the only option left on the table, if they get their way, if that's the direction they decide to go, is an expanded playoff. Now, Commissioner Sankey shocked everybody by saying I think he's good with just the conference champion making, because in the current model, SEC bias still lives strong, man. He could have had 5 teams in last year. They just didn't hold up their end of the bargain. I think having 4 automatic qualifiers might actually only limit the SEC to 4 rather than, getting the 5 in that they could possibly get.
Yeah, and I like Lane Kiffin saying get the 5 or the best teams in, whether it be 5, it could be 6. If you're Greg Sankey, obviously you're trying to push for as many SEC teams to get into the model every single year that you can. And I heard Kirby Smart say, and if you do look at other sports, man, you mentioned college basketball. Look how many teams, 2 in the Final Four, 5 in the Elite 8. I mean, come on, several in the Sweet 16. You look at college baseball, out of the top 8 seeds, 4 of them are SEC and hosting super regionals. And usually in the last 5 years in baseball, it's been 5 or 6 teams of the 8 in the College World Series. At least half the field is SEC. It doesn't matter the sport. The SEC makes predominantly a heavy portion of postseason play. So when they're saying, why is the main sport of the SEC not getting over half or more than 1/4 of the teams that should be in the playoff, I understand their gripe, because you're right. I know they blew it, but still, this is a tough league. And South Carolina, Alabama, both those teams 9-3. Ole Miss beat Georgia 9-3. You could tell me on a neutral field, they're better than Indiana. They're better than Arizona State. They were better than Boise State. And so if we're going by the best teams, and we do, I know Josh Pate likes the Vegas model, and we do on a neutral field, who would you favor? Maybe they should be in. Obviously, the SEC would get over 5 teams, I feel like, every single year.
Yeah, look, if you're Auburn, if you're a team like Auburn, you're sitting here and you're thinking, look, we've got one of the easiest schedules we've had in quite some time. In 20 years, we've not seen a schedule like this for Auburn. And they've got an opportunity that if they can pull it together, they could be on the back end of a lot of these talks, taking advantage of the opportunities created by expansion. I think Hugh Freeze has got the quarterback he wants. He's got a great defense. They made DJ Durkin the 2nd highest paid assistant coach in the country in the offseason. And if they've got the receivers, if they have the system employed the way that they feel like it, they should be right in the mix, ready to take advantage of the new opportunities that Greg Sankey is trying to create. His job is to advocate for his conference. I get it. I do.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, though, this comes down to making sure that your teams hold up their end of the bargain and win football games. You've got to continue to win. We didn't have an SEC champion in the national championship game this year. It's got to be an SEC champion, I think, in this next year. And he's got to make sure that those teams are up to snuff when the time comes.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And if you look how the SEC has played out over the last couple of seasons, obviously they've had several of the top teams in the country. And you know what? This whole conversation is not about Georgia or Alabama in the past, because they're going to be in the conversation every year. This is giving the South Carolinas, the A&Ms, the Auburns an opportunity each and every year. Hey, we don't have to go in 11-1 or 12-0 and have that magical season. We go 9-3, 10-2. We can make the playoff. And if you're Greg Sankey, the more teams that have that mindset, they're willing to spend a lot of money, now put all the resources, it's only going to make the product better. And that is the whole mindset of Greg Sankey. And I feel like the SEC and the Big Ten, and any of these other conferences, but I get also why someone like the ACC is like, yeah, I don't like that. I don't want SEC getting this many bids every single season. But it's interesting, this conversation. And I'm with you, man. I like the fact, and if you're an Auburn fan, the more teams, the better, because it doesn't matter how tough your schedule is. You win 8 or 9 games, you're in the top 15, you get to make the playoff.
Yeah, look, Is Auburn actually a fringe contender? Sentiment is starting to rise for the Tigers in the national media. Could they enter the playoff conversation come November? Next on the Auburn Express.
This episode of the Auburn Express is brought to you by our friends at the Vibe Vault. You can find them at 3462 Crosswinds Road, Suite E in Phoenix City, Alabama. That's right across the street from the Chattahoochee Valley Community College, next to Renfro's Supermarket and Marco's Pizza. The Vibe Vault. If you're in the Columbus, Phoenix City area and you're looking to get fresh for the weekend, get fresh for the weekend with the Vibe Vault. Not just barbers, lifestyle consultants.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at the Rogue Shop. Visit rogueshop.com. Use code REPORTER to get 15% off your Rogue Shop order. Pain, sleep, stress, anxiety, bammers, whatever ails you in life, the Rogue Shop has something that has you covered. And our friends at Golden's Cast Iron. Visit goldenscastiron.com/WR. Use code Get Your Weight Up for 15% off your weights and code TWR for $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills. Summer is on the way. Spring is here. You want to be outside by the grill making memories with your family or just getting into shape. Work out, grill out, chill out with Golden's Cast Iron. Thrift, could Auburn find their way into the playoff conversation come November? It feels like every week that passes, and as we start to have more conversations about the college football playoff, hope is rising for Hugh Freeze's team. I think it's a testament to what he's built through recruiting. He said he's okay with the expectations because it means that they've given people something to expect, something to get excited about. I tend to agree with them. I am hesitant. Everyone is hesitant to say the quiet part out loud because of how the first 2 years went. But we were always supposed to be talking about Auburn as a fringe playoff contender come November in year 3.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And before I say that, I want to say, by the way, Vibe Vault, you got my man Mike G looking fresh, man. Holy smokes. I'm going to be making my way for that lifestyle consultant, dude. But back to what you were just saying. Again, and I'm going to emphasize this one more time, not only is this good for conversation that allows more teams an opportunity to feel like they got a chance to make the playoff as you expand it to 16 teams, but it saves jobs, Mike. Think about this. Now, Hugh Freeze, if you go 9-3 and finish in the top 16, you're in the playoff. And listen, you're not getting fired once you make the playoff. I feel like Auburn realistic expectations, you make the playoff every single year and you're contending, that's pretty much all you can ask for, especially in the situation you're in, being in between Alabama and Georgia and in this recruiting hotbed that you're in. So I completely agree with you. It gives now more Auburn fans room for excitement because it makes you think, listen, we don't have to have a Cam Newton type year. You don't have to have the Prairie Jordan Hare and the kick six to have a championship season or the 0-4 undefeated year. You can go 9-3, 10-2 and have a mishap here or there and still make the playoff. That's got to make you feel good for teams like Auburn, A&M, Arkansas, not the cream of the crop. They're always going to be there, the Texas, Georgia, and Alabama. I'm talking about that middle of the pack teams. And that's where Auburn's at right now. And I think this is good for Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, I think it's good for him as well, too. Vegas set that over and under at 7.5. Those guys are not dumb. They understand what potential this team has, but they understand where the floor is at as well, too. So if the bottom falls out, it could drop below that 7.5 number. That's not something I think is a reasonable expectation in year 3. I think the reasonable expectation should be 8 wins or more, especially with this schedule. Now, you start with Baylor August 29th. That's a Friday night game. You get Ball State, South Alabama, and then you open SEC schedule, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Georgia. After that, you see Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, Vandy, and Mercer. Probably the most winnable 5-game stretch I've seen in quite some time. If you're not in the playoff talk come November, what does that look like to you? Does it, what's an acceptable going into November, right? You've got 4 games left. You're probably 6-2 headed into that stretch at best. But if you're not 6-2, how bad would a 4-4 team be going into November? Would it be time to hit the panic button?
I feel like it would, and that's just in my opinion, because you still got to look how you still have a tough stretch to finish out November as well. Listen, Mike, you just want to be relevant at that point. I keep saying you want to be in the conversation. So, yes, if you're telling me 4-4 and you still have a tough stretch, which includes Alabama to end the year, you have to start thinking, if you're an Auburn fan, another year down the drain, another year where everyone else is talking about what they need to do, what scenario that needs to happen for their team to maybe make the playoff. And you're looking on the outside in as maybe being an upset contender, someone that can derail a season for someone else. Are Auburn fans not tired of that? Is Hugh Freeze not tired of that? And I know people keep talking about with Hugh Freeze, when has he proven sustained success? His only claim to fame is beating Alabama 2 years. Again, look where Ole Miss was at when he took over that program. And look where Auburn's at when he took over this program. The man can recruit. The man can put his teams in conversation. He did that with Ole Miss. Yeah, he never won the SEC, but he had him in the conversation. He's going to eventually get Auburn to that point. Can he deliver a championship? Can he deliver at the highest level year in and year out? We don't know. He was on the way of doing that at Ole Miss before he got fired. So let's give him time, everyone, before you start griping, complaining. And again, look at the situation he had to take over at Ole Miss and now at Auburn. By year 3, year 4, that's when the winning starts coming around. And I think Hugh Freeze is going to do that. And yes, going back to your question, 4-4 would be disastrous. Let's at least get to 6-2, because at that point, you're leaving yourself an opportunity to maybe make the playoff.
Thrift, I want to close this segment talking a little bit about how you get to that 6-2 and what that looks like. And look, there are going to be stars along the way. Like, if Auburn's going to get to November 6-2, stars are going to be made along the way. I think one of those stars is Cam Coleman, and I think that this could be the platform season that leads to a potential Heisman campaign in 2026. I think he's that good. If Jackson Arnold is your guy and he breaks that 3,000-yard mark this year and returns for another season, you got Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Malcolm Simmons, Bryce Kane, whatever new dynamic player they're going to continue to bring in through high school recruiting or the portal. Cam Coleman, in my book, could be Auburn's next opportunity to have a Heisman winner. They've never had one at wide receiver, but talk to me, man, a homegrown kid here. They finally stopped the bleeding. They stopped Nick Saban from raiding the state and getting the best players, whoever he wanted out. Now Nick Saban is retired. Kalen DeBoer damn sure is not going to beat Hugh Freeze for in-state recruits, man. No. Talk to me about Cam Coleman. Am I crazy in thinking that he could be a Heisman candidate going in to the 2026 season?
I think he can. And again, it goes back to the development part that Auburn's had talented receivers. Remember Nate Craig Myers, who was a 5-star coming in that didn't pan out to anything? How about Kyle Davis? That guy was elite. Don't even get me started on Duke Williams, who was a possession receiver. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Kobe Hudson, and this just name a few. Sammy Coates, who wasn't a 5-star, but turned into ended up being a great receiver. But developing route running receivers that get the football in prime position to be successful. When have we seen that? When have we had a 1,000-yard receiver? It has been a long time for the Auburn Tigers. So I want to buy in what you're saying, Mike, that if the proof is in the pudding all time, Auburn does not do a good job developing their wide receivers, no matter how talented they are. Now, here's the thing. I think Cam Coleman is talented enough to overcome that. And I also believe that Hugh Freeze is starting to now figure out where his offense at, where his bread and butter is going to be. And hopefully there's a quarterback leading this team to get Cam Coleman the football. So a lot of factors go into Cam being successful. I think this offseason with the staff changes, with identifying what your offense is going to be and finding a star quarterback, that can lead to Cam Coleman eventually, yes, being a Heisman Trophy contender. And one of the first we've had, I guess, since Trey Mason, that really was in the conversation about making it New York. It's been over 10 years.
Yeah, look, Trey Mason probably – look, I know everybody will scream about Bo Jackson and Cadillac, but by the numbers, Trey Mason definitely one of the best Auburn running backs to ever don a jersey. 1,800 yards he ran for that season. Look, Jameis Winston ended up winning the Heisman that year, deservedly so. But Trey Mason making it to New York, boy, he was an absolute monster. Went for 300 yards in the SEC championship game versus Missouri. Look, Auburn has been able to produce high-level players. Cam Newton obviously won the Heisman in 2010. Would be unprecedented to see a receiver win it for Auburn. But we've got 2 quarterbacks and a running back. Would love to see a receiver added to the list of players who make it to New York for the Heisman ceremony. Look, I don't know if Cam Coleman is going to win it, but Thrift, you're my Heisman for the week. I appreciate you joining the show. Before we get out of here, as always, tell people where they can find you.
Before I say that, I do want to also say Kerryon Johnson in 2017 went for a few nagging injuries, and that what happened in the SC championship game. He's another guy that should have made it to New York because I thought he was the best running back in the country that year. Just want to throw his name out there because I don't want to forget how great of a season he had in 2017. Yeah, it's Sports Vision's morning show, 92.1 FM. We're the only morning show in Auburn, Opelika, LaGrange, Columbus, and 100-mile radius in the Chattahoochee Valley area. 92.1, Facebook, YouTube, and of course, Georgia, Alabama Sports Live. All things high school, regional, national, and locally. We do everything from college to pro. Georgia, Alabama Sports Live, Sports Visions. Mike G, appreciate it, man.
Guys, that's it for another great edition of the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. If you're in the comments after the video, do us a favor, smash that super thanks button. If you like this content and you want more, please hit like and subscribe. We are the War Report on every social media platform. TW Report on TikTok. We're signing off, and as always, War Eagle.